All right, today we've got Daniel Green here. He has his 95, this is a regular cab short bed truck, and he's got a new power plant in it this year. He was actually here last year, right after the Waggler race. You blew a head gasket out there, and he was 2,000 miles from home, and I let him use some shop space to pull his head on his 12-valve setup that he had last year, and he fixed a head gasket, and he had a couple other issues. I think he got a little carried away doing a burnout, you know. It was one of those situations where he was at a 1320 event and started doing a burnout, and he just couldn't quit until all his pistons looked like molten lava. So now we kind of talked him into going into a common rail, and so this actually has a common rail out of a 2020 Dodge.
Yep.
So this is the new CGI block, and then Waggler has their new rods in this block and their solid roller lifters in it, so it does not have the hydraulic lifters anymore. Otherwise, it's pretty much a stock head, stock block, stock pistons, and then we have our standalone harness with a 849 0607 ECM on it, and we are going to do some injector comparisons today. Exergy actually built two different sets of injectors with some different spray patterns in it, because for the 6.7 full is a little bit different. They wanted to try some things that we've learned on the race truck. We're going to try to get that done today, and we also want to get him dialed in so he can run 590.
Yep.
So you've been on the track, what, you've made 10 passes or so now?
Yeah, six passes.
Yeah.
We've went, our fastest 60 foot was a 135, and our fastest time has been a 6:03.
Yep.
And the Dyno 70 still lives.
Yep. So it was out at Maverick Diesel. They did a back half on it, 4-link setup, and so really he's got a good setup where he should be able to go out and run 590 fairly easily without just a ton of horsepower. It weighs what's the
4,300 with me in it.
Yeah, 4,300. So got a good setup. We're just trying to get it dialed in today, figure out what the different power levels are, and then we're going to do the ejector comparison. But that way he can be equipped to hit the road again and go race 590 and hopefully win some rounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your, I don't know, you want to tell a little bit about what you're doing? You're pretty much on a world tour, just racing, living out of your trailer for the summer?
So last year we did a semi-tour, made about 15 stops last year, made a name for myself. This year, with the help of Levon, OptiLube, and Waggler, Maverick, and everyone supporting the truck, we decided to go out and do it again this year. And I think we have 20 stops on the tour this year and no burnout pits.
Yeah, you got a little carried away on that one.
Yeah.
So really the goal of this is he should have a setup that he should be able to make 100 passes on this thing and really just change the oil in it, hopefully.
That's the goal, yeah.
The Dyno 70 is a little bit in question because with the trans brake coming off of it hard, you may snap the pinion on it. Worst case scenario, you may be in the market for a 9-incher sometime or another.
I have 2 pinions sitting in the trailer, but yeah, we'll need a 9-inch pretty soon.
Yeah. Okay, stay tuned. We'll see what it does. This is a 85 millimeter turbo, 96 turbine housing, turbine wheel with a 132 T6 turbine housing, and 14 millimeter Exergy CP3, and 400% over Exergy injectors, 6.7 rail. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, we just went through some stabilize, put it on a little bit of load, and we can tell that we don't have torque converter lockup. He has his lockup wired in on a boost switch, and we had bypassed that, so we're going to look at this and figure out what we did wrong on the wiring, and then we can continue to dyno. Well, unfortunately, it does not look like there's a wiring problem because we just checked it at the pin, and it's getting the wiring for lockup, and line pressure is jumping when you turn lockup on, so the valve body's getting the command. We're suspecting that the converter has too much clearance where the input shaft seal is not reaching the lockup seal in the converter. So to fix that, you have to pull the trans out, and you either have to machine maybe 200 thou off the face of the adapter plate, or you have to get a converter built that's a little bit taller. They had originally put together and it was a little bit too tight, so they had the converter sent back out and built shorter, and I'm guessing it just got built a little bit too short. So we're probably going to pull the trans and address that problem. We might have to do that tonight after hours or something like that, but we will figure out a way to get this thing back on the dyno with lockup so that we can get accurate numbers. Okay, here's the torque converter out of Daniel's truck, and if you look over here, it's still really hot for some reason. These two marks right here, that is the distance that the converter was able to pull away from the transmission to bolt up. So we're thinking the converter is a little bit too short to where the tip of the input shaft, this isn't out of his trans, but the seal inside the torque converter rides right here in the middle. And if there's too much clearance right here, and then this seal will ride on the top of this input shaft, and then when lockup pressure comes up here, it actually leaks past the seal and it won't get you a full lockup. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing some discoloration of the lockup clutch, where the lockup clutch tries to apply and it actually burns the face of the cover here. So we're guessing that this torque converter lockup clutch is actually compromised and will need a different torque converter to go back together. We were hoping that we'd be able to just machine the adapter plate maybe another 150 thou thinner to where it would move the torque converter closer to the transmission and fix the problem. But that would probably fix the problem, but if this converter clutch is already compromised from that clearance being incorrect, then we're just wasting our time. So we'll probably grab another torque converter and throw it in and put it back together with the correct clearance. Did you fix it?
Yeah.
So this is Daniel's valve body, and we just verified that lockup and everything is working. You can see converter lockup apply right here. Everything is working correctly.
It's 11 o'clock at night. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Josh told me to sand this down, so...
You're doing as you're told.
Yeah. He says if it squeaks, you're pushing too hard.
That's probably right. If you look here, you can see that this plate is actually distorted and no longer flat. Because when you flat sand it here, it's only hitting on these outer edges right here. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but you can see it all the way around. So the pressure is pushing down on this and actually distorting this pressure plate. So we are going to just replace it, because we'll often hit it with this stone here to make sure it's perfectly flat, and if it's not flat, we'll change it. We're back on the dyno on day 2. We're ready to start where we thought we were going to start at yesterday morning. Okay, that was tune 1, did 1,204 horsepower. That was on 1,000 microseconds and a conservative timing table. So everything is very healthy. The high compression pistons in these things tend to respond very well to the fuel quantity. We are going to add 100 microseconds and a little bit of timing and run it again. And as long as we keep seeing an increase of power every time we add fuel, we know we got plenty of turbo. So we'll run this up until we run out of turbo, and then if we want to, we can turn nitrous on and make more power. Alright, so we ran 4 different tune files. We started at 1,000 microseconds and we added 100 microseconds each tune. So 1,000 microseconds, 1,100, 1,200, and 1,300. And we see the power. We started at 1,204. Actually, the 1,225 was the same tune. I actually just loaded this up harder until I got it figured out. So 1,225 was 1,000 microseconds. 1,301 was 1,100 microseconds. And 1330 was 1,200 microseconds. Then we went to 1300 and it did 1311. So power actually fell down with more fuel. That tells me that we have all the air we can, and that added fuel was just choking out the cylinder, was not able to utilize all that fuel. So you're going to need nitrous if you want to make more power than 1,330 horsepower if you want to turn it up. We still got plenty of fuel to add. Pumps are doing good. That was like 700 milliamps on the 14 mil pump, so we can run a good bit more fuel if we want to. But there's no point. That added fuel is just going to turn into smoke. So now, so either you'd have to change to a bigger turbo, or you have to add nitrous if you want to make more than 1330. But overall, it tells us our power curve. I ran this all the way up to 4,600 RPM, where you can see we're making peak around 4,200 RPM. That gives us our 1,000 RPM power window that we know where we need to shift it through to get our track times to run the same, to reflect our horsepower number. But really, you don't need 1,330 horsepower to run 590. So we're going to try to dial him back closer to 1,000 horsepower, 1,100 horsepower, somewhere in there. But we're going to give you tunes, that way you know what horsepower each one makes. So if you go out and run a 595, you know you want to add 50 horsepower, you're going to know what tune file to put in there to add about 50 horsepower to try to get that to a 590. Okay, now we're going to give Daniel more work, since you like wrenching on your truck so much.
Yeah.
We're going to have him pull the valve cover and change injector. So when we talked to Exergy about this project being a 2020 engine and running a 2020 piston, they had two different ideas of what they wanted to run on injectors. Two different nozzle styles, the one the factory style and then one with a different hole count in the nozzles. So they actually built two sets of injectors. They both flow 400% over. So it's the exact same fuel quantity. It's just a different count of holes in the nozzle itself, which will affect how the fuel plumes gets introduced to the air. So if you picture my fingers as fuel plumes and the air comes in around it, if you have less or more fuel plumes, it will introduce the air to the fuel plumes longer or shorter, and that will affect your dwell time and will often affect horsepower. So in turbo limited applications where guys have a 2.6 smoothbore, 3.0 smoothbore, you'll see guys try 4 or 5 different sets of injectors. They're trying different piston combinations, piston bowl combinations, different valve sizes. They try all these different combinations. So tests like we're doing on the dyno today is results that we give back to Exergy, and they're able to use that R&D to move forward, and anybody buying 6-7 injectors down the road benefits from a dyno session from today. So now that we're gonna let this thing cool off for a couple minutes, you can start pulling the valve cover off. We're gonna swap injectors, run the exact same tunes again, and see if the different holes count makes a difference in horsepower, and that will give us the results that we're looking for today. All right, injectors are changed. We're getting ready to fire it back up, and we're going to go through and run all 4 of those tunes again on the same injector pulse width, and see what boost differences are and what horsepower differences are, if the different number of holes in the nozzle make a difference on horsepower. All right, let's fire it up. Okay, the second set of injectors did not yield the results we were looking for. We lost 65 horsepower pretty much across the board. Did not make, pretty much, they were just low on power. They made the same boost. EGTs were about the same. Couldn't really see any gains one way or the other, so we're gonna take them back out and go back to the first set, and that'll give us the results we need to share that with Exergy so they know what injectors are the best spray pattern and hole size to use for this injector or this piston bowl. So we're gonna let Daniel go back at it and swap his injectors back, since he loves doing everything twice. And we'll put it back on the dyno, and then we'll probably turn a kit of nitrous on and see what this setup makes with a little bit of nitrous. We had to do one nitrous pull, so we put a 136 jet in one kit, and that did 1,641 horsepower. That is going to kick Josh McCormick off the number 10 spot. He brought his daily driver in earlier this year and did 1319. I believe he just recently dynoed 1760 out west. So if he comes back, he can maybe find another place in the top 5. But we are right now going to put Daniel Green in the number 6 spot, and that's going to take Matt Gardenia down to number 7. So this list is getting a little bit harder to get onto because there's a lot of heavy hitters this year. But altogether, I'm really happy with how Daniel's truck runs. It spools and responds real nice. We can get the thing on boost good. I think he's going to be able to go out and run 590 easily, and hopefully the truck will be able to make laps and be able to do that at 1,000 horsepower and not really even tear parts up. You know, it should be able to go 100 passes and not have to work on the truck all the time if his Dana 70 survives.